he's just been assassinating them in true Bruce Lee ninja style, and therefore I think that's a good thing, because he's just going to slip in, and before anyone knows it, he might have won the tournament. Obviously, he is someone who would be in the spotlight. Everyone knows who Bisu is, but there hasn't been as much talk around him as there has been around someone like Xavier. So that's one of the things that I find interesting this season. Another thing that I find interesting is the fact that Bisu defeated Xavier yet again, and Xavier, despite his quote-unquote slump, has returned back to form and hasn't really lost to anyone else. And in fact, he made Shark look like quite a noob, even though Shark is a very good player. The MSL, thankfully, the last matchup we saw was a Zerg versus Zerg, and we saw Gorush just decimate July, and that was unfortunate, and that was painful to watch. I really didn't expect July to lose that badly, but this matchup, we can expect it to be quite an improvement on the previous one. I think, Bisu is expected to win. More than likely, he will win. But at the same time, there are a lot of factors that might weigh against him in this matchup that you've got to take into account. First of all, take a look at the map pool. Okay, we don't have New Arachnoid. Thank God for that. We don't have Desert Fox. Thank God for that. But we do have Desperado being played twice if it goes to Game 5, and we also have Monty Hall. And I think those two maps, if played correctly, in my view, would probably favor the Terran player over the Protoss player. I know people are talking about lots of Reaver drops and the like on Desperado, but I think Desperado is an ideal map for Terran, and I have seen Terrans win a lot on it. I think the things that work very well on Desperado are, first of all, the 2 gas, which I think works to a Terran advantage. I think the other thing is that there's so many places to drop on a map like Desperado. There's just so much area that you have to defend. It's so easy to drop. We saw Xavier drop. I mean, you don't really see Zerg versus Protoss drops that often. They are done, but they're not that frequent. And Desperado is one of the maps where you can see it done effectively. So Terrans have lots of places to drop and siege effectively against a Protoss player on this map. And if the matchup does go long, and I just see, just for syncing purposes, Hwasin seems to be praying in front of his computer and obviously begging for help. I think that, as I was saying, Desperado is a map that you can expect to probably see a lot of drops on, especially from the Terran player, and, the fact that the Terran player has lots of areas from where they can drop and they can siege their tanks, they can drop inside the opponent's main, which you see more in Terran versus Terran on Desperado. I haven't seen a lot of Terran versus Protoss on Desperado, but I do think that it's very likely that Desperado is a map that favors Terran a little bit compared to Protoss, and I think that if the game goes into late game, then Hwasin has a decent chance on it. I think probably on Python, Hwasin is going to get demolished. I think he's going to get demolished badly on Python, and the game versus Bisu proved that. We haven't seen a lot of Protoss players triumph versus Terran players on Python too often. I remember Reach gave Justin a massive thumping on Python as well. So definitely, I think Python is probably a little bit more favored to Protoss players. Loki as well is hard to tell. Some people are saying that Loki might actually favor the Terran player and it might specifically favor Hwasin because of his macro-oriented style and because it is a very macro-heavy map. And definitely Loki is one of the maps where it's harder to do cute tricks. It's harder to do cheeses and proxies and things like that. Though that being said, we did see Gorush execute a beautiful proxy against July in Game 1. So Loki, in my view, is tough to call. Monty Hall is really a choice of starting strategies as far as I'm concerned. I think the player who goes for the early expansion is going to have the benefit. I don't think cheese is going to work. I know Protoss like to cheese a lot on Monty Hall, but assuming Hwasin has learnt some common sense and scouts, I think he's going to be fairly safe on Monty Hall, and I think he should be able to, provided he expands early enough and is able to defend it, he should be able to win on Monty Hall. We've seen time and time again, players who expand early tend to have an advantage because it's such an easy map to defend on. And again, Game 5 is going to be on Desperado, where it's going to be impossible. It's as I said, I favor Terran on that map. But I still think this matchup is not as predictable as everyone claims it to be. I still think anyone can come out on top. And as I said before, Bisu's pumping against Hwasin might have been a very clever tactic on the part of someone like Hwasin. It might have been, he just played a bad game or didn't really try and allowed Bisu to beat him. But at the same time, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, if Hwasin was trying his best, if he was really trying to win the game as well as he could, and still got hammered in the way that he did, losing to mass scouts, and I know Preston Boy doesn't agree that they were mass scouts, but ultimately Bisu did beat him with scouts. And definitely Bisu wasn't trying. Hwasin seemed to be ahead. He seemed to have more expansions early on and all that. And Bisu just out of nowhere came and won the game on Python. So I think if that was the case, then Hwasin has got to have be at a huge psychological advantage here, and that's going to just make the importance of game 1 just surmount it, just send it up to the absolute heavens. Because if Hwasin can win game 1, if he can somehow manage to win game 1, he's going to gain a lot of confidence, and he's going to dent Bisu's veneer of confidence. He's going to dent Bisu's veneer of invulnerability, that shield that he has around him, that he is unstoppable, that he is untouchable, as he pretty much has been most of this season. He's lost, as I said, even when there hasn't been a lot of noise around Bisu, he's just racked up those wins without too much trouble and without too much pomp and ceremony. So if Hwasin can take that first game on Desperado, I think that might set the tone of the matchup. If, on the other hand, Bisu beats Hwasin, and especially if Bisu trounces Hwasin on Desperado. Someone's talking about my glass. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, so if someone if Bisu trounces Hwasin on Desperado, then I think you're going to see a 3-0 again, as we saw in July versus Gorush. I don't think Hwasin will have what it takes to recover from an early crushing defeat. If it's a close match, then anything can happen. We did see in Xavier versus Nada last season, where the first match was long and tough, and we saw it again in Xavier versus Nalra as well, where the first match was long and tough. And I think when players come up against players like Bisu and Xavier, and players come up against such dominating forces, such unstoppable elements, what they inevitably find is that they give it their all, especially in the first game. And if they are not able to win the first game, if they can't overcome the first game, then usually they've expended their energy upon it, and they then become deflated. So the first game is going to be absolutely key here. And I would really compare Bisu to someone in the likes of Roger Federer. And the reason I compare, and I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of Federer, and they're just playing the intro now, so the game is going to start. I hope I'm not too behind you guys. There was a good post by Siku on the Team Liquid forums of how to keep up with my cast. But the game is starting now. The first set is on Desperado, and I'm just going to give the countdown when it starts to sink in. And they haven't started yet. So as I was saying, yeah, I would compare Bisu to Roger Federer, and the reason I say that is, and I'm not a huge fan of Federer, I'm definitely not a big fan of Federer, but the reason I would compare Bisu to Federer is because I feel, and actually I'm going to take this opportunity, if the game hasn't started yet, to, actually it probably has, it started on GOM, hasn't it? So it must be starting here now any second. If I'm really far behind, if the game started for you guys, just let me know. Okay, it's starting now finally. So I apologize if I'm behind you guys, because my stream has buffered a couple of times. I will restart my stream in this, and we go 2, 1, 0. Here we go, it started. And okay, here we go. Someone just sent me a private message saying they sold 5 of my videos on eBay that I commented on for $245. I think that's a joke. I don't believe that. I think you're talking crap. Anyway, so here we go. Bisu versus Hwasin. Bisu obviously playing Protoss, and he is at the 10 o'clock position, and Hwasin is at 8 o'clock playing Terran. So I think the close proximity of the two bases definitely means drops, and early drops are going to play a prominent role. I think scouting is going to be very important. Scouting early, if they can scout early and realize that the opponent is close by, that's going to affect the choice of strategies. As I was saying, I would compare Bisu to someone like Roger Federer, who I don't rate very highly. And I apologize. It's not that I don't rate him highly. He is a very solid player. He's a legend, a living legend in his own right. But I don't like him. And the reason I don't like him is because I feel he lacks personality. And I have to say, I feel the same for Bisu. I think he's a great player. I think he's a very good player. But he doesn't have that extra zing that makes you attractive to him the way Xavier does. I know he's the new Protoss hope, and that's why Protoss players like him a lot, and he does dominate. But he just doesn't seem to have that coolness about him. We all saw the Bisu romantic video on MSL, on MBC, often advertising Bisu's personality and his other qualities and making him more appealing to the Korean fangirls. But nevertheless, I do feel that Bisu does not have that level of personality to attract people to him, and it's certainly he doesn't seem that exciting a person, even though he's a very exciting player to watch. He's just more like Roger Federer. He's like a machine. He is a mechanical monstrosity with instructions to kill without making any discrepancy, without making any allowances for man, woman, or child, and he just crushes all in his path as he goes along. He just destroys the rainforest, and he just doesn't care. And I know Xavier is considered to be the evil boss, and we can see actually Hwasin is taking the early gas. Hwasin actually starting his gas before starting up the barracks. I anticipate Bisu has probably done the same. So both players going for pretty much expected tech builds here. One gateway gas, one barracks gas, and we can probably expect to see an expansion set up probably after the factory for Hwasin, and I would say probably after the core for Bisu. So as expected, both players going for that tech early. Dropships are vital on this map, and Bisu has actually sent out his probe to scout early. Bisu has sent his probe out to scout first, and he hasn't found Hwasin yet. So because he's scouting counterclockwise, he's actually going to